You know those mornings where everything feels peaceful, until suddenly, your trash can explode under the wheels of a pearl white Escalade. Yeah, that was me, Alex Thompson, 44 years old electrician, just trying to get my kids to school in Willow Creek subdivision outside Chicago. I'd moved there 2 years ago after my divorce, thinking a nice, quiet neighborhood with good schools would be the fresh start we needed. But I had no idea I'd end up in a war with the self-appointed queen of the HOA, Diane Hargrove. Picture this: it's 6:15 on a Tuesday, the garbage truck is still 20 minutes away, and I'm inside making coffee, when I hear that sickening crunch of plastic giving way, followed by the scrape of metal on asphalt. And then she's gone, speeding off like nothing happened. This wasn't the first time Diane had accidentally smashed my bin. It was happening almost every collection day, and after the fourth time, I knew it wasn't random. Her pearl white Escalade was bigger than half the garages on the block, and she drove it like a battering ram right at the corner where Mike had to sit according to city rules. I tried talking to her like a normal neighbor. One afternoon, caught her on her power walk and said, "Hey Diane, about the trash can situation." But she cut me off with that fake sweet smile of hers. "Oh, Alex, you new folks just don't understand how things work around here. These streets are narrow, and your containers are creating a hazard. Maybe you should adjust your timing for what the garbage truck comes at the same hour every week." That's when I started digging into the rules. Turns out the city code required the bin within 3 feet of the curb on pickup day, and the HOA had zero authority over public right-of-way. But Diane didn't care. She was buddies with the board president and treated the monthly dues like her personal playground. By the end of that first month, I'd replaced 4 trash cans out of pocket. The kids were embarrassed watching their dad crawl around the driveway picking up coffee grounds and cereal boxes, and my ex was already using the drama against me in our custody talks. Mrs. Alina, our elderly neighbor across the street, finally pulled me aside one evening and whispered in her quiet voice, "She does it on purpose, Alex. I've seen her adjust her wheel every single time. There's plenty of room, but she aims right for your spot." That little confirmation lit something in me, because bullies like Diane don't just stop, they escalate. And sure enough, the certified violation letters started showing up: improper receptacle creating traffic hazard, $50 daily fines, all that nonsense. I spent nights at the kitchen table after the kids were asleep, referencing ordinances, printing surveys, and mounting a doorbell camera, because something told me this wasn't really about a plastic bin. It was about power and control, and maybe even a deeper resentment toward a divorced guy like me moving into her perfect little world. I could feel the neighborhood watching, wondering if I'd back down or fight. And honestly, for a while, I wondered the same thing myself. But watching my teenagers' worried faces every morning made the decision easy. This wasn't just my battle anymore. That conversation with Mrs. Alina stuck with me, and by the time November rolled around, Diane had turned the whole thing into a full-blown personal crusade, sending violation notices for my grass being a 1/4 inch too long, my mailbox color looking a little faded, even 3 tiny holes in my window screens that you'd need a magnifying glass to notice, while half the neighborhood had the exact same issues. But somehow only my house was getting the special treatment. I walked the whole subdivision one Saturday with a tape measure and camera, documenting everything, and the pattern was obvious. 49 out of 67 citations in the past year had gone to single parents, older folks, or families that didn't quite fit her vision of perfect suburban life. It wasn't just about the trash can anymore. It was about reminding people like me that we were outsiders in her kingdom. That's when I decided it was time to stop playing defense. I ran into Mike, my buddy, who's been pouring concrete for 25 years at the local supply yard, and when I told him the story, he just grinned, that slow, knowing smile, and said, "You know, Alex, nothing in the city code says your trash can has to be plastic as long as it holds garbage and meets the size rules. You're good to go." So that weekend in the garage, with my kids helping and classic rock playing on the old radio, we built something special: 60 pounds of reinforced concrete. Inside, a regular-looking bin shell steel rebar, running through it drainage holes. Everything perfectly legal from the outside. It looked just like every other can on the block, but this one wasn't going anywhere. Emma, my 16-year-old, kept laughing, saying, "Dad, this is either genius or we're about to get sued," and Tyler, my 14-year-old, was all in mixing the concrete like we were building a fortress. Pouring that mix felt therapeutic. The alkaline smell took me back to working with my own dad years ago, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night knowing Monday morning was going to be different. 6:15 Tuesday, the familiar rumble of that oversized Escalade came down the street, and I watched from the kitchen window, coffee warm in my hands, as Diane lined up her usual attack. The impact hit at her normal speed, but instead of the satisfying crunch she expected, there was this deep, solid thunk, followed by the screech of metal bending, and her running board crumpling like cheap foil. She sat there stunned for a good 30 seconds, then backed up and tried again, harder. Same result, more damage to her $60,000 SUV, zero to my concrete beast. Over the next week, she kept coming back each morning, more desperate than the last, dent after dent, scratch after scratch, while Mike just sat there looking smug with a few scuff marks that actually made it blend in better. The neighbors started noticing. Mrs. Alina would wave at me with a little smile. Jim, the maintenance guy, gave me a thumbs up, and even some of the teenagers were filming it on their phones. But Diane wasn't the type to quit. She went full detective mode, cruising past my house at odd hours, shining flashlights in my driveway at night. Once, Mrs. Alina caught her trying to weigh the can with a bathroom scale like some suburban Sherlock Holmes. She started filing more complaints, calling building inspectors, claiming I had unauthorized structures on my property, and even cornered Jim at the hardware store, grilling him about who bought concrete recently. That's when things got really interesting, because while she was obsessing over my trash can, I started digging into something bigger. Patricia, one of the more reasonable board members, pulled me aside after a neighborhood event and quietly said, "Alex, you should look into the maintenance contracts. Diane's been pushing real hard for this new company I've never heard of, and the bids always seem to land in the same place." Late one night, after the kids were asleep, I started searching public records, and that's when the whole ugly picture came together. Diane Hargrove had quietly started a construction company with her brother 6 months earlier, and somehow that company had landed 7 different HOA contracts for landscaping, sidewalks, and community repairs, totaling over $28,000, with her voting to approve every single one without ever disclosing the conflict. The bids were always just enough under the others to win, but the pattern was crystal clear. She was using her power on the board to funnel everyone's monthly dues straight into her own pocket, and my indestructible trash can had somehow become the symbol, threatening to expose all of it. I sat there in the dark kitchen staring at the screen, feeling this mix of anger and strange satisfaction, because now I understood the real reason she'd been targeting me. It wasn't just about a bin on the corner. It was about protecting her little embezzlement scheme from a guy who wouldn't back down. I printed everything, made backups, and quietly started building a team. Mrs. Alina for door-to-door support, Jim for eyes on the ground, Patricia feeding me internal documents, and Mike for technical backup. We met in my garage, turning it into a makeshift command center with timelines, photos, and financial printouts taped to the wall, and for the first time, I felt like the tide was turning. Diane could keep smashing her fancy SUV into my concrete can every morning if she wanted, but she had no idea the real collision was coming straight for her carefully built empire. The pressure kept building, and Diane started cracking in ways that went way beyond trash cans. One Saturday night, I woke up to the hiss of spray paint outside and caught her on camera crouched by my concrete bin in the dark, leaving bright orange letters spelling "move" across the side. It washed off in minutes, but the footage was crystal clear, including her Escalade parked 3 houses down. Then came the anonymous calls to the gas company about fake excavation, the building inspector who left shaking his head, and even a GPS tracker that my son Tyler found stuck under my work truck one evening. That one really got to me, because it wasn't just about neighborhood rules anymore. She was stalking my family, and that crossed every line I had. I hired a retired detective to document everything, and by then the whole subdivision was buzzing with stories of her selective enforcement against anyone who didn't fit her picture of perfection. We turned my garage into full war room mode, with Mrs. Alina organizing, neighbors Jim keeping watch, and Patricia slipping me more financial records. The evidence was rock solid, over $28,000, funneled through her family company, with her voting yes every single time without saying a word about the conflict. I reached out to Channel 9's investigative team, and they got interested fast. By the time the big board meeting rolled around, the community center was packed wall to wall with 127 homeowners plus news cameras in the back. You could feel the tension thick in the air, like right before a summer storm. Diane showed up looking pale and sharp in her usual blazer, but her hands were shaking as she sat at the head table next to the nervous board president. I stood up first with my folders and the projector ready, and laid it all out calmly but firm. "This stopped being about a trash can months ago," I said. "This is about a board member using her position to steal from every one of us, while bullying anyone who got in her way." I played the 12-minute video compilation of her 57 collision attempts, set to the sounds of crunching metal, and the room went from quiet to stunned, then angry. When I showed the contract records and bank transfers, the murmurs turned into outright shouts. Diane shot up from her chair, her face twisted. "You people don't understand what it takes to keep standards high," she yelled, pointing fingers and letting every ugly resentment spill out about outsiders ruining the neighborhood. The racial undertones were impossible to miss, and the cameras caught every second. She actually tried to grab my evidence boards before 2 neighbors gently stopped her, and that's when the police officer walked in with the warrant for insurance fraud and stalking charges. The room erupted. Diane's meltdown was complete. She was screaming, crying, and threatening everyone, while the board voted 4-0 to suspend her on the spot. She was escorted out, still yelling, as the news vans outside lit up the parking lot. In the weeks that followed, it all came crashing down. She resigned in a 2-line email. The district attorney filed charges. Her insurance license got pulled, and the emergency audit recovered every dime of the missing money. Every homeowner got a nice refund check just before Christmas, and the new board under Patricia's leadership brought in real transparency rules and open bidding, so nothing like that could happen again. I settled with her family for $12,000, which went straight into a scholarship fund for kids who stand up to unfair systems. My concrete trash can now sits in the community center lobby with a little plaque that says "Property Rights Protected," and every new neighbor hears the full story. Emma and Tyler still tease me about it, but I can see how proud they are. And my custody situation stabilized because the judge saw a dad willing to fight smart for his family. Looking back, I realized the whole mess taught me something deeper than just winning a neighborhood war. Bullies thrive when good people stay quiet, and sometimes the strongest resistance isn't loud or violent, it's patient, well documented, and backed by a community that finally decides enough is enough. That 60-pound concrete bin didn't just stop a bully, it helped expose a system that needed fixing and reminded me that ordinary guys with tools and truth on their side can still make a real difference. So tell me in the comments, have you ever dealt with an HOA Karen or a power-tripping neighbor who crossed the line? What would you have done in my shoes? Drop your own stories below, because I read every single one, and maybe the next video can be about one of you fighting back the right way. If this story hit home, give it a like, subscribe for more real-life justice tales, and share it with anyone stuck in their own neighborhood battle. Justice tastes a whole lot better when it's served concrete cold.